Andrea was a 5-year-old girl who adored spending time with her mother, Sarah. Their lives were simple, yet filled with love. Sarah always went above and beyond to make Andrea feel cherished, cooking her favorite meals, helping with homework, and reading bedtime stories every single night. But one day, everything changed. It was a morning like any other, yet it would end in unimaginable devastation. That day, Andrea went to school, completely unaware it would be the last time she'd see her mother. By late afternoon, the school principal entered Andrea's classroom, her serious tone and worried expression hinting at something terribly wrong. Andrea was called to the office, where she found her father, George, waiting. He stood by the window, hands buried in his pockets, staring out into the distance. When Andrea walked in, he turned slowly and sighed deeply. "Andrea," he began, his voice strained, "your mother, she had an accident. She's gone?" Those words hit Andrea like a lightning bolt. What? What do you mean?" she stammered, her voice trembling as tears welled in her eyes. George avoided meeting her gaze, standing still as he delivered the crushing news. "She's dead, Andrea. There's nothing anyone can do." Andrea began sobbing, but George didn't console her. He remained detached, his cold demeanor amplifying the weight of the tragedy. He stood there as if unable to process her pain, or even his own. That evening, the house felt emptier than ever. Andrea sat curled up on the couch, clutching a pillow, as silence filled the air. George walked in, glanced at her briefly, and said, "You'll have to be strong. Things have changed, and we need to move on." Without another word, he disappeared into his room, leaving Andrea alone to grapple with her grief. In the days that followed, George's coldness became increasingly evident. He avoided mentioning Sarah, as though pretending she had never existed. Andrea, however, couldn't stop thinking about her mother. One day, she mustered the courage to bring up a cherished memory. "Dad," she said softly, "Mom used to make pancakes every Saturday. Can we do that too?" George, without even glancing up from his newspaper, replied curtly, "That won't bring your mother back. You need to stop dwelling on it." George had been trying to transfer the funds to his account without Andrea's knowledge. Furthermore, testimonies from neighbors and school staff corroborate Andrea's accounts of neglect and emotional abuse. While the physical evidence regarding the car accident is still inconclusive, the defendant's behavior and statements, as reported by Andrea, paint a concerning picture of his motives and character. The lawyer paused, allowing the weight of their words to settle. Then Mary stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "Your Honor," she began, "my daughter Sarah lived for Andrea. She worked tirelessly to provide her with love and stability. When Sarah passed, George not only failed Andrea as a father but actively caused her harm. Andrea deserves a safe home, free of fear and manipulation. I only wish to honor my daughter's memory by giving Andrea the life she deserves." The judge nodded, her face grave. She addressed Andrea directly. "Andrea, is there anything you wish to add before I make my decision?" Andrea hesitated, her small hands clutching Mary's for reassurance. Then, with a deep breath, she looked up at the judge. "All I want is to feel safe," she said softly. "I want to live with someone who loves me, not someone who only cares about money." Her words hung in the air, simple but powerful. After a long pause, the judge delivered her verdict. "Having reviewed all evidence, testimonies, and the best interests of the child, I hereby grant permanent custody of Andrea to her grandmother, Mary. Furthermore, Mr. George will remain in custody as the criminal investigation proceeds. Any attempt to contact Andrea directly or indirectly will result in further legal action." The room erupted in quiet murmurs. George's face fell, his facade of arrogance finally crumbling. He was escorted out of the courtroom, his protests falling on deaf ears. Andrea turned to Mary, who hugged her tightly, tears streaming down both their faces. "It's over, sweetheart," Mary whispered. "You're safe now." For the first time in what felt like forever, Andrea felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be long, but she knew she wasn't alone. With her grandmother by her side, She could finally start to heal and dream of brighter days to come. Said, "I won't, Grandma. I promise." From that day forward, Andrea's life began to blossom. The scars of the past were still there, but they were no longer chains holding her down. Instead, they became reminders of her strength and the love she had found in her grandmother's care. Mary continued to nurture Andrea's spirit, encouraging her to explore her talents and find joy in the little things. They painted together, planted flowers in the garden, and spent evenings stargazing, sharing dreams and stories. As time passed, Andrea grew more confident, her laughter ringing through the house like a melody that Mary hadn't heard in years. She excelled in school and discovered a love for art, often drawing pictures of her mother, Mary, and the park swings that had become a symbol of freedom and happiness for her. One evening, as Andrea tucked herself into bed, she looked at the photo of her mother on the desk and whispered, "I miss you, Mom, but I know you're watching over us. I'll make you proud." Mary, standing quietly in the doorway, felt her heart swell with pride and gratitude. Together, they had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. The future was uncertain, as it always is, but Andrea and Mary knew they had each other. With love, resilience, and hope lighting their path, they were ready to embrace whatever came next. And for the first time in a long while, their home was truly filled with warmth, laughter, and the promise of brighter tomorrows.